All right. We're good. Okay. So today, I want to do a little bit of a review on stuff we kind of touched on last week with JavaScript in the browser, a little bit about the HTML and CSS we went over, and then I want to introduce you to something new, which is jQuery. Okay. Can everybody see this okay? All right. So before we jump into jQuery, actually let's make an HTML page that we can play with. So let me get my terminal open. Let's see, on my desktop. There, we'll just call it jQuery. See the end of that. Cool. I want to make an HTML page. What do I need to do first?
Touch it. Touch it.
What do you mean? I made it already.
Oh.
Sorry. I want to write the code for it.
Doc type.
I need my doc type, right?
Doc type, head, body.
Head, body. I actually have this, which is going to do it for us. But let's just go over this real quick. So we have, our doc type at the top. Then we have our head. What kind of stuff lives in the head? What do we put in the head? I mean, you can see some of it here, but
links and titles.
Links, the title. Go ahead, John.
I was going to say title.
The title, absolutely. Does anybody know what these meta tags are? So we can also put like a lot of like metadata up here. This is where we would put like a lot of things for search engine optimization. So you could put keywords in here. There's a bunch of stuff that's actually even way beyond my knowledge, but you put a lot of data can live up here. We also have our link to our style sheet. What else? Do you remember what else we put up here last time or last week? Where did we put our JavaScript link, our link to our JavaScript?
Script tag.
In a script tag. And do you remember where in the document we put that?
Bottom of the page.
Yeah, why did we have to put it at the bottom of the page?
So the page loads first.
So the page loads first, absolutely. Because everything in the HTML page loads in order, right? All the way down. And if we're selecting, especially since we're using JavaScript to select elements on our page, if we're selecting something that the page hasn't loaded yet, our script is going to break, right? So we're going to change that a little bit. With jQuery is going to actually allow us to put it up here, but I'll get to that in a minute. Just so we have something to mess with, I'm going to copy and paste so you don't have to watch me do this. Put a list over here. Let's get rid of these buttons for now. And for now, let's just put our script tag down here. All right, and let's open this up. Why are you doing it for me? There we go. All right, cool. So let's separate these. Come on, man. All right, there we go. So we have our, I don't know why these don't show up when I have it projected, but all right. Browser. Here we go. Okay, so here's our fancy page, right? If I wanted to select all of these list items, who can talk me through how to do that in the script tag?
What are you trying to do?
Select all these list items. So I have all these list items. Sorry, I'm not being clear.
I get element by, what's that say, class?
So I have this class, programming languages. I also have, these are all LIs.
Do you have IDs for?
I do not have IDs on here.
Okay, so get, well, it's your only list, so you could just get by list.
Sure. So what would that look like?
I don't know the syntax for it. It's document dot, try get element by type, maybe.
So it's actually, I think for this one, it's going to be query selector.
Yeah.
Like this. And then what goes in here?
LI.
Cool. And actually, you know, let's console log this. Cool. This over here. There we go. Oh, that just gave us one. Oh, because you know what? We need to do query selector all, I believe. And this is probably like that. There we go. So we get this thing called a node list, which operates a little bit like an array. And it gives us all, if you can see up at the top, like as I'm going down, it's selecting each one. And so this is giving me each thing. Cool. So this is a little bit of what we did last week. You were using document.getElementById, document.querySelectorAll to update the DOM in real time, like and manipulate the DOM with JavaScript. A couple of things I want to point out. So we talked about how when we load our HTML page, it loads from top to bottom, right? And did we talk about the DOM in general, the document object model? Okay, so when your browser receives HTML, it just receives, that's just plain text, like a string. It's just this big, long string. And the browser receives that and then parses it out into something that we call the DOM, right? The document object model, which is a tree structure that allows the browser to kind of keep track of everything in your HTML. And it looks a little bit like this, right? So each node, like, so we have our body, and these kind of correspond to our tags, right? So our body tag, we might have a paragraph tag that has a span inside of it, et cetera, et cetera. So we have these nodes that have child nodes, so nodes that are inside them, and then parent nodes, like what is inside it, or what it is inside of. Does that make sense? Cool. So when we are doing, I think it's important to understand, when we do document, when we were doing that last week, where did that go? When we do document like this, we're actually accessing the DOM, right? Document is, it's not exactly the DOM, but it is representative of the DOM, right? So when if I just select document, you can see right here, this is our HTML page. Here's our meta tag, all our stuff, and then our body should just have this list in it, and our script tag. Here's our main with our list. Cool? Make sense? All right. All right, so for a while, when JavaScript was just invented and just coming into like popularity, you could do some things with it. You could access some of these elements, but moving through a complicated web page was very difficult. And creating some of the behavior that you wanted to create over and over again was also very difficult. Now that JavaScript has evolved, vanilla JavaScript has a lot more things built into it than it did before. But before that, those things were very difficult. And so some people got together and created this library called Jquery. And Jquery is just, it's built in JavaScript. It's just a JavaScript library that allows you to create all sorts of behavior and manipulate the DOM with writing way less code. That's basically it. It just allows you to write way less code. Let's see. Cool. So I'm just we're gonna do a little bit of stuff DOM stuff with jQuery. So the way I use jQuery is I need to bring it into my document. And there's a bunch of different ways we can import JavaScript libraries. In the beginning, we were doing it by, or how were we doing it? How were we getting JavaScript libraries earlier in the semester? Do you remember? Or earlier in the cohort, I guess. We were importing it. npm install, does anybody remember doing that? Yeah. npm install, yeah. So that's one way that we can get these JavaScript libraries. Another way is by including the tag directly in the HTML element itself. This is annoying that I can't see that. Okay. So let's see. So I get something called a CDN, which I always forget what CDN stands for. Let's see what it stands for.
Canadian dollar.
Canadian dollar. Content Delivery Network. Really all this is a link. It's a link that you're putting inside of your HTML page that says, cool, when you're loading this page, go fetch this library for me. Go to this URL, grab this library, load this JavaScript library for me. Just do the minified one. So here it is right here. So a lot of these libraries will have them all set up for you, right? See how easy this is? I can just copy this tag right here and put it directly into my head right here. Cool. So now what will happen when this page loads, it'll see the doc type, it'll load the head, put a title in here. It'll load the title, all this metadata, it'll look for a style sheet that doesn't exist right now. Then it will get to this. It will see the source, which is this URL right here, and it will go fetch this JavaScript library and load it for me. And then it will go ahead and load the rest of the page. Since we can put it up in the head, since this just fetching this library, it's not like running, it's not going to run any methods or anything for us. So we can put it up in the head because it's not going to be targeting anything down here. Make sense? Okay, cool. I don't need this right now. Cool. So if we reload our page, nothing should change. Cool. So now we have access to some other things. So before we were doing document.query selector all list. Now that we have jQuery, which I'll talk a little bit more about how we use it, we can just do this. And this should give us the exact same thing. Cool. And so now we have all of our list nodes. Cool. Are there questions on this so far? Okay. So let's talk about what is going on here? What's happening? So we've loaded in this library jQuery, which allows us to have all sorts of methods that are going to kind of make things a little bit quicker for us. We access all these jQuery methods with this $sign right here. This is sort of like the placeholder for jQuery, right? You can think of it, if you remember when we were creating modules in Ruby and we were putting classes in them, and sometimes we had to access them by doing stuff like we had like bank and then : account, right? Because we had like a module bank, and inside that was a class account, and we wanted to get at it, and we kind of namespaced it so that we wouldn't mix stuff up like that. That's a little bit of what's going on here. Like the $sign is representative of the jQuery library. So when we use the $sign, it's telling our script, oh, I want you to go into the jQuery library and get like this method, or use this method that is specific to jQuery. So we can do a lot of the stuff that we were doing last week like this. I can select, so I have this list of nodes. I can select just one of them. So it can work just like an array. I can select one node. Let's do this actually in the browser because this is annoying. Like this. So we can actually run all of this code in the browser as well. Cool, so here's all my nodes, right? If I do the same thing, 0 here, I can get the first one. I can access all that. So now I can actually do text, and I can change this to like hello. It's not a function. Oh, maybe I can't do text like that. Oh, there we go. It's inner HTML. I always get that mixed up. There we go, and it changed up here. See that? So memorizing these things that I'm doing right now is not the point. The point is that you can start to see that these things are possible, right? That you can use JavaScript to start changing things in the DOM. Questions? No? Cool. Let's see. So we know how to find things. Another thing I want to talk about jQuery that we need to talk about. Let's see. Okay. So let's make a separate JavaScript file because it's really not good practice. Just call this like application.js. So it's not, normally you would not put your script tag with your JavaScript directly in your HTML because you're going to have a bunch of JavaScript and you'll want to keep it in a separate file. So before we were loading it up here, or I'm sorry, before we were loading it down here, does anybody remember how we loaded the script file?
It's like import or select or something. Script source.
Import, yeah, import was how we were doing it when we were using npm. But when we do it with this script tag, you're right, we do source. And then it's just the relative path to where you are at. So application.js. This should be it. And I always, so every time I load something like that, I always want to check and make sure that my connection is working. This is something that like can get you stuck a lot. All right. Do that. And so we'll make sure that we're hooked up. There we go. Hello. So we know that this is working. jQuery gives us this special, where is it? All right. Gives us this, this method right here, this function right here. So you're going to see this a lot. And you're going to want to put this in, whenever you're using jQuery, you're going to put this in your JavaScript file. So what this is saying is, this is a jQuery function. It's grabbing the document, right, which we talked about. That's the DOM. That's what loads right away. And it's putting this on ready function. So basically this is saying, don't run any of the JavaScript until the document is ready, right? So it's pausing it. It's waiting for the whole DOM to run, and then it runs this anonymous function that we have in here, which is where we can put all of our code. So now that we have that, it's best practice to move this back up to the top. So now we can move this back up here. And this should still work. So now we can put log working. Working, cool. We have this right here. So what's happening is our project is loading. I mean, our HTML file is loading. It's going down, loading the meta tags. It's getting to this source. It's going and grabbing jQuery. Then it's getting to our script tag, and it's loading our JavaScript. So it comes into here, and it sees this document ready, and it says, okay, cool. I'm not going to run any of this function, anything in this anonymous function until the document is fully loaded. So it will load this, but it won't run it. And then it will go the rest of the way down, load the rest of our file, and when it knows that the document is ready, it'll come back and finally run our console log. Make sense? Cool. Let's see. There is one other thing about jQuery I want to go over, or two other things I want to go over before we, one other thing I want to go over. Okay. So your challenges today will have you selecting things from the DOM. It will have you possibly changing some styles, and it will have you adding behavior. It will also have you adding something called an event listener. Does anybody know what that is? Has anybody used that yet?
Well, we did the learn.co tutorial, which had us do event listeners that created the falling rocks, and you move the slider around.
So what is an event listener?
It's just the document listens for events like a mouse click or a button press, and then it executes a function.
Yeah, it's a way for us to kind of anticipate and respond to user input. So we can listen for the way a user is interacting with the DOM, with the window, with the browser. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. You can listen for clicks. Excuse me. You can listen for mouse over. You can get the mouse coordinates on the page and listen for when the mouse is at a certain point in the page. Stuff like that. So real quick, I want to show you how that works because you're definitely going to be doing it today. I'm going to put a bunch of buttons on the page. Hopefully this will work the way I want it to. Cool. So I have a ton of buttons. We will load on the page, and right now they do nothing. Cool. They're all just a button. So in order for me to put an event listener on something, first I have to grab it. So we've already kind of talked about that. So how can I grab these buttons? How do I select them?
$sign button, $sign, then button. Does that work?
Yeah. This should work.
That always grabs all the buttons, though.
Yeah, so that's a great point. This is going to grab every single button. And we can do this where we can put an event listener on a bunch of different things, right? That's kind of what I want to point out. But that's a really good point. What we're doing right now is selecting every single button. And actually, I should be doing a better practice is whenever you want to test this stuff, rather than like constantly console logging, you can just jump right into the browser and do it in your console down here. So good. This gives us every single button, right? Just like we were doing with our list. So I can add an event listener to one button if I want, or all of them. I'm going to add one to all of them because I want to do something depending on which button I press. So adding an event listener is just .on, meaning on the event, when the event occurs. And then I can pass this a couple of different things. We're going to do click. There's other ones, submit, mouse over, like I said, etc. These are all in the jQuery documentation. But we'll do on click. And then I want to give it something to do. What do I want it to do when someone clicks the button? What does that mean? Is that intriguing to you? Cool. So right now, let's just have it console log pressed. Is it annoying watching me console log, console log, console log?
No.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we're doing this step by step by step. And I also want to show you, like, this is, especially if I'm doing something new, this is very much the pace that I'm moving and the way that I'm doing it, right? I want to set one thing up and then figure out a way that to test that it's working, right? So rather than writing my entire function about what's going to happen when the button presses, I just want to make sure that I'm grabbing that button press, that I can react to it in some way. So I have this button press. We will reload our page, and every time I click a button, cool. You can see each button I'm getting I'm getting pressed down here. Cool. So we have this hooked up. So what I want to do is I want to, when I press the button, I want it to disappear. That's what I want to do. So I want to, let's see. How would I do that? How do you think? Does anybody have any guesses?
There's probably a function for it, like $button dot delete or remove.
There is definitely a function for it, and you're absolutely right. It is dot remove. So how would I do that?
This specific button.
Mm-hmm.
$, and then I don't know. Is $, creating a hash or a lit or an array?
You mean up here online?
Yeah.
This is a node list, which is kind of its own object, but it has a lot of array-like behaviors.
So
we can iterate through it.
Could you do bracket 0, or like bracket or whatever, or self?
So I get what you're saying. Yeah, self. Like, does everybody understand the dilemma that we have here? If we do this, let me show you. Cause John, you're totally on the right track, but I want to make sure everyone understands. So if we were just to do button.remove like this, what would happen? What would happen if we did this? What do you think? Take a guess.
To get all the buttons.
All the buttons would disappear, and let's actually just watch it totally fail. Because what we're doing is once again selecting all the buttons and removing every single one. So what I want to point out is we have selected a node list, but essentially a list of things. We've selected every button. We could have given the button an ID and selected each one, but we want to create this behavior where it doesn't matter. We don't want to have to guess which button they're going to press first. Just whatever button is pressed, that's the one we want. And so we can grab that. John was totally onto it. We can grab that button, the one that we're referring to in this event listener with the keyword this. And so do we remember this? Have we gone over this a little bit with JavaScript? It's very similar to self in Ruby. And it basically refers to the, this in JavaScript is basically self in Ruby. It's the same. So when we start talking about objects and classes a little bit more in depth in JavaScript, we'll be using the this keyword to refer to the object that was instantiated. But this is hard because you say this so many times. Okay. In the context we're talking about right now, this refers to whatever element this action was performed on. I'm going to say that one more time because this can be very confusing. In this context, this keyword refers to whatever element the action right here that we're describing was performed on. Cool? We can prove that. Hopefully this helps by just console log. Oh, actually, we have to do it like this. So here's the thing too. You see that we're wrapping it in this $sign. This is something that jQuery is giving us, right? So we have to wrap it in here to grab it. Wrap it in the $sign parentheses to grab it. I'm gonna come back here. This. And so if I click the button, it's actually gonna be hard for us to tell because these are all the same. But you can see it's just giving us one at a time. And if I hover over them, it should. No. Okay, cool. So now, knowing this, we can just do, whoops. Move. If I come back over here, hopefully. It's hard to tell because it's like jumping them back, you know what I mean? It's like, but we can do it in order like this. Cool, each button I press is removing. Cool, cool. Let's see. That's about it with jQuery. I just want to show you one more thing. So here's the jQuery docs. They're pretty good. They're very good. They'll have most of the stuff that you need to do the challenges will be either in the challenges themselves. Like I said, the first challenge is going to walk you through pretty easily or hold your hand pretty well. And then from there, checking out the jQuery documentation, you're going to be able to find, see, there's all these different things. You can add a class. Don't worry about Ajax right now. We're going to go over that tomorrow. Append. That'll be, there's a bunch. I'm not going to go over everyone. Each, end, etc. Find, focus. So just to recap, the big lessons for today are learning to manipulate the DOM using JavaScript, working with selecting groups of things, selecting individual things, changing things in the DOM with JavaScript. And today, specifically, we're going to be using jQuery to do that. I said in the beginning that jQuery was invented at a time when JavaScript couldn't do some of this stuff on its own. Now it can. jQuery is still an extremely important thing to learn. You might not use it directly in your job. You might come to, if you come to a job where they're building new stuff, they might not be using jQuery, right? The lessons that you're going to learn using jQuery are universal. The fact that you're manipulating the DOM, that you're changing things, that you're adding behavior, there's a hide and remove and all that stuff. You'll be doing that no matter what. The other reason we teach it is it is so popular and was so popular for so long that it is in tons of legacy code. So it is very, very likely that you will come across it at some point. So knowing it is important, or at least having some familiarity with it. Again, I do not think today it is a thing that you need to memorize all of jQuery, but getting familiar with, again, how to use a library outside of just vanilla JavaScript is important. And the lessons that it's teaching you, kind of moving through the DOM. Cool. Are there any questions before we go to the assignments for today? Yes, John.
Do that macro where it just created the HTML5 template, does everybody have that, or did you?
No, you can write those in Sublime, and I'd be happy to go over that at a different time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you show me the link that you pasted in?
Sure. We can go over that one more time. So here it is right here, right? But I mean, I didn't memorize this. Who could memorize this, right? So I grabbed the CDN, which I already forgot again what it stands for. All I did was Google jQuery Cdn. I don't remember how I did that again. Cool, and then this is the most up-to-date one. And then you're gonna see like uncompressed, minified, slim, slim minified. Uncompressed just means like this is, I believe, like this is the readable code, right? Like this will be all indented and like you could go through it and look at it. Minified, I believe, is where they remove all the white space. These are all just different versions of the same thing. Slim and slim minified those might have less features. I'm not really sure. I'd have to look up exactly the difference between these. But the minified one is fine. That's the one I was using.
If this website goes down, does your jQuery go down?
Yeah, that's a great question. So because we are using the CDN to go grab the library, if this site goes down, then you're not going to be able to use jQuery, right? So other ways that you can do this, but the way people do this, or the reason that you might use a CDN is, one, that means you're delivering less code, right? So you're having to deliver less code. You're having to store less code on your server. But you could very much download the entire jQuery library, store it on your server, and send it on your own, right? So if you wanted jQuery and to be able to play with jQuery without an internet connection, like if you just wanted to be able to write some jQuery and you didn't have Wi-Fi access, you can download the whole library and just keep it in a folder in your directory, and you would have access to it. But for our purposes right now, I think linking to the CDN is fine. Any other questions?
Should we use the most current version then?
Yeah, I would use the most current one.
Okay.
Is that it? All right, cool. Let me stop this.